In this movie, we'll look at different ways of selecting objects. Now, the traditional way we've been doing it by picking or dragging boxes around things is great when you're working with very small assemblies, but again, as your data becomes more and more complex, as it will, it's nice to know different ways you can grab things. If you'd like to work along, please open the file in Chapter 2 named Mixed Up. So once the file opens, you'll notice we have a mix of surfaces, polysurfaces, curves, points, and dimensions. And we know we can select them by holding down Shift and clicking on the objects. We can also drag a window from left to right, and anything that's fully enclosed by that window will become selected. And that works from upper left to lower right, or lower left to upper right. Anything that's completely enclosed by that box will be selected. Also remember, if we go from right to left in our selection box, anything we just touch with that box will be selected. So you can see I have the tube, the cube, and these dimensions only partially being touched by this box, and they're going to be selected anyway. Remember, as always, if you select too many things, you can hold down Control, click on them, and deselect them. You can also hold down Control and drag a box to deselect them. That's pretty easy to do when your models aren't too complicated, but as things become more and more complicated, we want easier ways to select things. And the way we do that is using the select commands. And those are located in two places, either under the Edit menu, and you can go to Select Objects, and you can see a whole host of options there. Or we have a toolbar flyout for that we're going to be working with, and that's this flyout here. And let me just manipulate that a little bit so it looks a little less intimidating. We won't look at every single one of these in this movie. Once we've looked at a few of these, you'll get the idea of how they work, and you can kind of play around with these and try out some different ones to see if there's some you like more than others. So let's go ahead and look at a few of these. So the first one is Select All, and we simply click on that and everything is chosen. Right next to it is Select None. Fairly straightforward. So instead of doing those, the quick key commands for those are actually Control A to select all, or we can just hit the Escape key to select none. So if we have everything selected, we can hit Escape, or if we've done a Control A to select everything, we can click this to select none. Another handy one is this icon right here, and that's Invert Selection. So let's say I have a bunch of objects selected. Let me pick one from over here, something here, and something up here. So now by clicking this, what it's going to do is going to invert the selection. So everything that's selected will become unselected. Anything that's not selected currently will become selected. And then from there, you could just take those and hide those parts, and now you've got everything hidden that you want. This icon represents Select Last Created Object. So let me just drag a box here and create this. And once I click on this, you'll see it chooses that box. Now this is pretty straightforward out here, but you're going to find a lot of times when you're working up close with very intricate small parts that can become quite hard to select an object. So that tool can become very, very handy. Let me go ahead and delete that part. This icon represents Select Previous Selection. So let's say I had a few things selected, and we'll pretend this is part of a very complex scene, and I'm trying to go through and select a lot of things. And then accidentally, instead of holding down Shift-click to select the next one, I accidentally click on the screen and everything deselects. Well, now I can just go to this icon, click this, and it's going to choose everything that was previously selected. So that can be a big time saver, as I said, if you're working on a complex scene and you accidentally deselect your objects. So one I use quite a lot is this one here, and that's Select Duplicate Objects. Now you may have noticed a few times while I've been clicking around dragging, you'll see the selection menu come up because we have duplicate surfaces laying here. So here we have some duplicates, and we've got some duplicates laying throughout this scene. I'm not quite sure where they are. In order for an object to be a duplicate, it not only has to be the same object, it has to occupy the exact same space in the 3D world, so you don't get these strange overlaps. So as I click here on this purple cylinder, you can see there's two extrusions there. There's others sprinkled throughout this scene. So rather than try and find them, I can just go to Select Duplicate Objects. Now anything that's selected now is the duplicate of that object. I can then hit Delete, and I'm only deleting the duplicate. So now that leaves the original of that object. Let me undo that. And I'm just going to deselect this line here. And I've deleted all the duplicates except this one. You can see if I click here. And when I click on duplicate objects, that becomes selected. But let me zoom in on this curve. I'm just going to move it ever so slightly. So now we have the same curve, but again, it's not occupying the exact same space in 3D. So now when I click on duplicate objects, it's not selected. And again, that's because in order for an object to be a duplicate, it has to occupy the exact same space as well as be the same object. So if I move that back, now click duplicate objects, you can see now it is selected. Let me do a zoom extents to get back, and we'll undo that and bring all of our objects back. Another command you'll find very handy is select by color. What that does is select the object in your scene by what color it's displayed by. So if I choose this object here and click select by color, it's going to choose everything that's green in the scene. Now keep in mind there is a duplicate here, so if I control click on this, I've actually taken the one surface out of there. And since there were two surfaces there that were duplicates, one is still selected and you just can't see the other one. So this can be real handy as you're working in your model. Sometimes when you're working, instead of having your display color set to by layer, which it is by default, you might have everything changed to a certain color, let's say red here. So if I need to select a bunch of items that might be on different layers, but they're all painted the same color, I can use this command. So that selected object, and you can see according to the layer menu, the layer they're on varies. That lets me know I've selected objects across layers. And as I said, that can be very, very handy as you're working on more and more complex objects, because sometimes you will color things that are on different layers that perhaps get the same material when you're sending them to a different render program, or you need to work on different parts of them or remind yourself to work on them later. So I do end up using this command quite a lot. We also have the select by layer command, and if I click on that, my layer display pops up. Shows me all the layers that are currently active, and I can say select things that are on these layers here. Then hit OK. Everything that's on those 3 layers that I chose in the dialog box are now selected. We also have select points, and that selects all of the points in the scene. Again, that can be very handy as your model gets more and more complex. Sometimes it's very easy to lose sight of one of these points when it's inside a much more complex assembly of parts. We also have select dimensions. This can be handy to clean up your models. A lot of times your dimensions may be spread across different layers, and by hitting this I can select all of the dimensions within a drawing. A couple of the most powerful ones that I find I use quite often are select poly surfaces and select surfaces. So if I select this, any poly surfaces in my drawing are immediately selected. If I deselect that and click this, select surfaces, anything that's actually a surface is now selected in my drawing. And if I take this and explode it using the middle mouse button and then the explode icon, select surfaces, you can see this cube is now selected, and the reason for that is once I exploded it, it became a series of 6 surfaces. And the same with this object here. I can explode that, and we have end caps in the main body of this thing. So I can now select those. And if I do a join, and then do select surfaces, you can see those go back to being poly surfaces, and they're no longer able to be selected. And last but certainly not least is the select curves icon. As you're working on models, you're going to draw a lot of curves, and a lot of times those curves will end up spread over a lot of different layers, or in the case of when you start to duplicate edge curves, it's very hard to actually even see the curves that you've been creating. So for instance, let me go ahead and make some edge curves here. Now these are showing up quite well because they're being created on the default layer, but if they had been created on one of the layers that these models are sitting on, they'd be a lot less visible. I also have the pixel width of my curves turned up a little bit to make it easier to see for the video. But if I hit this select curves command, it's going to choose every curve, whether it's a poly curve or a freeform curve, in my drawing at once. Again, it makes things very nice for cleaning up, moving things off to different layers. So I can take all my curves. So every curve in this drawing is selected now. And let's see, I want to add all the points in the drawing as well. And then all the dimension lines. So I can keep clicking, and it's going to keep adding things to my selection. So once I have all of these selected, I'll just go ahead and I'll hide those objects. So now those are all hidden, didn't matter what layer they were on. And all I'm left with in my model here is just poly surfaces and surfaces. So as I said, it's a nice, quick, easy way to clean things up. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of other selection options in here. That's all we'll cover in this lesson. If you'd like to take a little bit of time and explore the different options in here, you may find some that become your favorites and you start to use them all the time. So that'll conclude this lesson.